So now I owned a boat. Never owned a boat before. Well, I had to figure out what I actually bought. There were times when I started digging into it, honestly, that I was questioning my decision. But at the same time, I'm one of those people that once I get into something, I just get it done. So first thing I had to do was give it a thorough cleaning in the driveway. It had years of grime built up on the boat from being under the trees, loads of junk inside, leaves, twigs, dead bugs. I didn't find any dead animals. Various rusty bolts, things like that. So I cleaned it all out, dried it all out the best I could, pulled it into the garage, and started doing some evaluation. Took a closer look around the outside of the boat. Noticed that one of the eyelets on the back that I'd used for a tie-down strap had pulled slightly out of the boat. Not a good start. So I went inside the boat and took a look at the inside of the transom, and I could see where the washers that were backing that eyelet had basically pulled right into the transom. So I unbolted it, the eyelet, and gave it a couple of pokes with a little flathead screwdriver, and it just went right through. Pulled a chunk out of it, and this is what I got. It was the inside of it looked more like potting soil than wood. So I knew I was in for some work. I then turned around and pulled up the floor. And literally, I just pulled up the floor. It was a piece of plywood, yes, that had been replaced, but not sealed, an unknown number of years ago, covered with indoor-outdoor carpeting. And the indoor-outdoor carpeting just served to retain the moisture in the unsealed plywood, and the plywood was completely rotten, which made it easy to pull up. It also pulled up the screws that they had somehow cleverly screwed right through the hull at the edges of the plywood. They had tried to screw it into the existing bits of the old floor, but gone right through the hull. I guess the screws were plugging the hole, so it didn't really leak too much, but I now knew I had some repairs to do in the hull. Nothing big, very small, little, just the tips of the screws had gone through. No big deal, but something to keep in mind. Underneath, the stringers seemed solid enough, but wet. They had used some very coarse roving to glass the stringers in when they replaced them, and looks like they had not used any kind of a mat underneath, and it seemed like the fiberglass wasn't actually stuck to the stringers, it was just around them. So it looked like I was probably going to need to replace the stringers as well. At least I had an idea of what I was in for. The fuel tank in the boat looked like it was a newer 24-gallon tank in the bow of the boat. Needed to be modified because the filler neck didn't really line up with the filler on the top of the deck of the boat. But at least the fuel tank was going to be usable, so that was going to save me some money. But now I had an idea of what I was in for, and I also decided that the trailer, even though it was solid enough and everything else, was going to need to be extended to match the length of the boat to provide some support for the last couple of feet of the boat. They had, like I said, extended the bunks, but the bunks weren't being supported by anything and they were warping. So I had some work ahead of me.